They laughed when I married the alien king's disgraced daughter. Now they're begging for our help. The Outcasts Union. Commander Reese Tanner stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel, watching as the crystalline spires of Valorous Prime glittered in the light of the binary stars. The planet was magnificent, a swirling marble of azure oceans and emerald continents, orbited by 3 moons that cast prismatic reflections across its atmosphere. It was beautiful, ancient, and completely unwelcoming to humans. "Commander, the Imperial escort has arrived," Lieutenant Jada Wong announced from behind him, her voice tight with apprehension. "They're requesting immediate docking protocols." Reese nodded, straightening his dress uniform. After 5 years of tense negotiations, humanity had finally secured an audience with the Valorian High Council. The stakes couldn't be higher. Earth and its colonies were running dangerously low on quantum fuel, and the Valorians controlled the richest deposits in the galaxy. "Better not keep them waiting," he said, his face a mask of diplomatic neutrality that betrayed none of the anxiety churning in his stomach. The Valorians were notoriously xenophobic, considering themselves evolutionarily superior to other species. Tall, silver-skinned beings with 4 arms and bioluminescent patterns that shifted with their emotions, they had been spacefaring when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Their technology was millennia ahead of Earth's, and they knew it. As the docking procedure completed, Reese led his small diplomatic team toward the airlock. "Remember," he warned, "no sudden movements, maintain formal posture at all times, and whatever you do, don't stare at their luminescence. They consider it deeply offensive." The airlock hissed open, revealing 3 Valorian officials. Their silver skin gleamed under the ship's lights, and intricate patterns of blue and gold swirled across their exposed arms. The tallest among them stepped forward, all 4 of their arms folded in various positions of formal greeting. "Commander Tanner," the Valorian spoke, their voice possessing a musical quality that human vocal cords could never replicate. "I am High Chancellor Zeth. The Council awaits your petition." The journey to the council chambers passed in tense silence. Reese noted how the Valorians they passed in the corridors would stop and stare, their luminescent patterns flashing with what his cultural briefings had taught him was disgust or amusement. Humans were a curiosity here, primitive beings barely worth acknowledging. The council chambers themselves were breathtaking, a vast dome of crystalline material that seemed to capture and amplify the light of the binary stars. 7 Valorian elders sat in an elevated semicircle, their skin patterns shifting in synchronized waves that Reese couldn't begin to interpret. "Approach, human representative," called the center elder, her voice echoing throughout the chamber. Reese stepped forward, feeling insignificant beneath their collective gaze. He began his carefully rehearsed speech, outlining humanity's proposal for mining rights in exchange for medical technology and defense treaties. He was barely a minute in when one of the elders interrupted with a dismissive wave of their lower right arm. "Your species presumes much, Commander Tanner. Why should we, who have traversed the stars for millennia, share our bounty with primitives who would likely exhaust it within a century?" Before Reese could respond, another elder spoke. "Perhaps we should hear them out, Vorn. Their persistence is almost admirable." "Admirable like the persistence of a mindless insect, Cora," Vorn replied, triggering ripples of luminescence among the other elders that Reese recognized as laughter. The diplomatic meeting was going exactly as he had feared, a public humiliation rather than a negotiation between equals. Reese steeled himself, preparing to continue despite the mockery, when a commotion at the entrance to the chambers drew everyone's attention. A Valorian female entered, her appearance causing an immediate hush to fall over the assembly. Unlike the others, whose skin glowed with perfectly controlled patterns of light, hers flickered erratically, flashes of crimson and violet that seemed to defy the ordered symmetry valued by her people. More shocking still was her size. She stood a full head shorter than any adult Valorian Reese had seen, with only 2 fully developed arms instead of 4. "Princess Nyx," High Chancellor Zeth announced, his tone a complex mixture of formality and disdain. "The council did not summon you." "I summoned myself, Chancellor," she replied, her voice lacking the musical perfection of the others, yet possessing a strength that immediately captured Reese's attention. "When I learned humans had finally been granted an audience, I thought I should witness this historic moment." "Your presence is unnecessary," Elder Vorn stated flatly. "Return to your studies." Princess Nyx ignored him, instead moving closer to where Reese stood. As she approached, he could see her luminescent patterns more clearly. They weren't merely erratic. They were forming shapes and sequences unlike any he had observed in his briefings on Valorian communication. "Commander Tanner," she addressed him directly, breaking protocol and causing several elders to flare with patterns indicating outrage. "I've studied your species extensively. Your adaptability is remarkable. Where we see millennia of tradition, you see possibility for change." Reese found himself momentarily speechless, not just at her unexpected defense, but at the intensity of her gaze. Her eyes were unlike any Valorians he had seen, flecked with gold where others had uniform silver. "The princess," Elder Cora explained to Reese, her patterns indicating embarrassment, "is something of an anomaly among our people, a genetic divergence that our scientists have been unable to correct." "Not for lack of trying," Nyx added dryly, her patterns briefly flashing in what Reese somehow understood as ironic amusement. The meeting proceeded with increased tension, the elders clearly unsettled by Nyx's presence. When they finally dismissed the human delegation with vague promises to consider their petition, Reese knew they had failed. Earth would not be getting access to the quantum fuel deposits. As they were escorted back to their ship, a junior Valorian aide slipped Reese a crystalline data shard. "From Princess Nyx," he whispered. "She requests a private audience aboard your vessel before your departure." The request was unprecedented and potentially career-ending, if handled improperly. Yet Reese found himself intrigued both by the princess's defiance of her people's prejudice and by the potential diplomatic opportunity her interest represented. Hours later, under the cover of a minor security protocol that temporarily disabled the docking bay's surveillance, Princess Nyx boarded the human vessel. Up close, her differences from other Valorians were even more pronounced. Her silver skin was etched with faint scars, evidence of numerous medical procedures, and her luminescent patterns continued their unusual dance of crimson and violet. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Commander," she said, her patterns briefly stabilizing into something Reese recognized as formal greeting. "I don't have much time." "I appreciate the risk you're taking," Reese replied, genuinely curious, "though I don't understand why." "Because my people are making a mistake," she stated plainly. "Our isolation has bred arrogance. We believe ourselves to be the pinnacle of evolution, yet we fear change so deeply that we've engineered it out of our genetics." Her patterns flickered with intensity. "All except for me, the failed experiment." She held out a crystalline sphere that pulsed with energy. "This contains the locations of quantum fuel deposits in an uninhabited system just beyond Valorian space, not as rich as our primary sources, but enough to sustain Earth's needs for decades." "Why would you help us?" Reese asked, suspicious of such generosity. "Because I believe in the potential of your species," she replied, "and because I need allies who understand that difference isn't deficiency." Reese studied her, seeing past the physical anomalies to the intelligence and determination in her golden-flecked eyes. In that moment, a wild, impossible idea began to form in his mind, one that could either save Earth or destroy his career, and possibly trigger an interstellar incident. "Princess Nyx," he said carefully, "what would you say to a more permanent alliance between our peoples?" Her luminescent patterns swirled in what he was beginning to recognize as surprise. What kind of alliance? The oldest kind, he replied, his heart racing at his own audacity. Marriage. Whispers of darkness continued. The following days aboard Proxima Station became a blur of urgent communications and clandestine meetings. Reese and Nix worked tirelessly, using their unique positions to gather allies without triggering mass panic. The station's research lab became their command center, filled with holographic displays of stellar maps and ancient Valorian texts. 4 more outposts have gone silent, Lieutenant Wang reported as she entered the lab, her once pristine uniform now rumpled from consecutive duty shifts. As Reese's former second-in-command and now head of station security, she was one of the few they'd fully briefed on the situation. Reese nodded grimly, updating the holographic display where red markers indicated the advancing wave of darkness. Patterns consistent. Whatever this is, it's methodical. Nick stood before an array of sensor readings, her luminescent patterns pulsing with concentration. Since the revelations about her genetic sensitivity, she'd been pushing her abilities to their limits, attempting to heighten her perception of the approaching entities. "They're not just coming," she said softly, her voice tinged with certainty. "They're searching." "For what?" Wang asked, voicing the question that had been haunting them all. "For me," Nix replied, turning toward them. "For anyone with the perception to sense them. My ancestors developed these abilities as a defense mechanism, an early warning system. That's why the Valorian Council has been so determined to breed it out of our genetic line. They feared what it connected us to." Reese moved to her side, nodding, the exhaustion evident in her dimmed luminescence. "You need rest." "We don't have time," she insisted, though she leaned slightly against him, drawing strength from his presence. "The Valorian High Council still refuses to acknowledge my communications, and your Admiral Ortega reports resistance from Earth's Defense Coalition." "People fear what they don't understand," Reese said, a statement that applied equally to their situation 3 years ago and the current crisis. A soft chime interrupted them as the lab door opened, admitting Dr. Oren Kapor, the station's chief scientist, and one of the few humans who had treated Nix with genuine respect from the beginning of her exile. His specialty in quantum physics had made him invaluable to their research. "I've analyzed the quantum field disruptions at the fallen outposts," he announced without preamble, projecting his findings onto the main display. "There's a pattern here that matches references in Nix's ancient texts, a systematic disassembly of matter at the quantum level." "Not destruction," Nix clarified, studying the data with intense focus. "Absorption. They're consuming the quantum energy, growing stronger with each outpost they take. Which means the more quantum fuel deposits we've harvested, the more openings we've created in the barrier," Reese concluded, the weight of humanity's unwitting contribution to the crisis settling heavily on his shoulders. "We need to establish new quantum fields," Dr. Kapor suggested. "Create artificial barriers using the fuel we've already extracted." "It won't be enough," Nix said, her luminescence briefly flaring with frustration. "The fields need to be anchored to planetary cores to generate sufficient power. The ancient texts describe a network of 12 worlds specifically chosen for their quantum resonance." "Then we find those worlds," Reese stated with determination. "Your ancestors defeated these entities once. We can do it again." A priority alert flashed across their screens, followed by Admiral Ortega's grim face appearing on the main display. "Ambassador, we've lost contact with Outpost Epsilon, but before communications failed, they managed to transmit visual data." The footage that followed chilled them to their cores. The outpost's external cameras had captured the approach of what could only be described as a moving void, not a ship or an energy field, but an absence that consumed light itself. Where it touched the outpost structure, matter simply ceased to exist, breaking down into component particles that spiraled into the darkness. "My God," Dr. Capper whispered, "it's a quantum-level predator." "That's our proof," Reese said, already composing emergency transmissions to both governments. "Not even the most stubborn officials can deny what they're seeing." "There's something else," the Admiral continued. "The Valorian Royal Guard has dispatched a vessel to Proxima Station with an official delegation aboard. Their communiqué specified that they're coming for Lady Nyx." Nyx's luminescence darkened with alarm. "They can't still be focused on internal politics at a time like this." "Actually," Ortega said, her expression unreadable, "their message stated specifically that the Valorian Empire requires the services of Princess Nyx's unique abilities. It seems your former tormentors are now seeking your help." A grim satisfaction flashed briefly across Nyx's features, her patterns showing a complex mixture of vindication and concern. "They're desperate," she concluded, "which means the entities have advanced further than we realized." After the transmission ended, Reese turned to his wife, seeing the resolve hardening in her golden-flecked eyes. "You don't have to help them," he said quietly. "Not after how they treated you." "I'm not doing it for the Council," she replied, her luminescence steadying into a determined glow. "I'm doing it for both our peoples. Besides," she added with a flicker of the wry humor he'd fallen in love with, "I've been waiting 3 years to say 'I told you so' to Elder Vorn's face." Reese couldn't help but smile despite the gravity of their situation. "I never thought I'd see the day when the mighty Valorian Empire would come begging for help from the genetic anomaly they tried to erase and her primitive human husband." "People change when facing extinction," Dr. Capper observed dryly. "Nothing clarifies priorities quite like an existential threat." The Valorian diplomatic vessel arrived within hours, its crystalline structure gleaming against the backdrop of space. To everyone's surprise, Elder Cora herself led the delegation, the one council member who had occasionally shown Nyx a modicum of respect in the past. The meeting took place in Proxima Station's Grand Conference Room, with representatives from both human and Valorian authorities present, many joining virtually due to the urgency of the situation. The tension was palpable as Elder Cora approached Nyx and Reese, her luminescent patterns displaying formal deference, a gesture neither had ever received from a council member. "Princess Nyx, Ambassador Tanner," she began, her musical voice subdued. "On behalf of the Valorian High Council, I come seeking your guidance in a matter of grave importance to all our peoples." "You mean the quantum entities that are currently consuming your outposts," Nyx replied, her tone carefully neutral despite the satisfaction she must have felt. "The very threat I tried to warn you about 3 years ago." "The very same," Cora acknowledged, her patterns showing what Reese recognized as genuine contrition. "Our archives have been selectively maintained over the millennia. Much of what you discovered through your father's private records was deliberately obscured from the General Council." "By selectively maintained, you mean censored to maintain the Council's narrative of Valorian supremacy," Reese clarified, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from his voice. "Yes," Cora admitted with surprising candor. "We believed isolation and genetic purity would protect us. We were wrong." Her gaze fixed on Nyx. "Your genetic variance, what we once considered a flaw, appears to be our only hope of detecting and potentially communicating with these entities." Admiral Ortega, who had arrived on an emergency shuttle hours earlier, stepped forward. "Communicating. The footage we've seen suggests these entities aren't interested in dialogue." "Perhaps not in forms we recognize," Nyx interjected, her scientific curiosity overriding her lingering resentment. "But my ancestors' records suggest they achieved some form of understanding with the entities before establishing the quantum barriers." "Understanding or not, we need a defense strategy immediately," a human general stated from one of the virtual displays. These entities have already consumed 7 outposts. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach populated systems within 2 weeks. There is a way, Nix said, bringing up the ancient star charts she and Dr. Kapor had been studying. The 12 anchor worlds form a network that, when activated simultaneously, can generate a quantum barrier strong enough to repel the entities. Most of those worlds fall within Valorian space, Elder Cora noted, studying the display. We can dispatch vessels immediately to begin preparations. It's not that simple, Dr. Kapor interjected. The activation requires precise calibration that only someone with Princess Nix's sensitivity can provide. She would need to be physically present at the primary anchor world when the network activates. A heavy silence fell over the gathering as the implications became clear. The primary anchor world, according to the ancient charts, lay directly in the path of the advancing entities, a suicide mission for whoever attempted it. "Then I will go," Nix stated simply, her luminescence steady and resolved. "No," Reese said immediately, the word escaping before he could filter his diplomatic training. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," she replied softly, her patterns shifting to show her love for him even as her determination remained unshaken. "My ancestors understood the sacrifice that might be required. It's why our genetic line has always been protected, despite the Council's discomfort with our differences." Elder Cora's luminescence dimmed with somber acknowledgement. The royal bloodline was preserved not for governance, but for this very contingency, a fact many of us chose to forget or deny over the centuries. "If Princess Nix goes, I go with her," Reese declared, his tone leaving no room for debate. "We've faced prejudice, politics, and impossible odds together. We'll face this the same way." The planning that followed was intensive and fraught with challenges. Teams were dispatched to each anchor world to prepare the ancient quantum technologies described in Nix's records. Dr. Kapor worked tirelessly to adapt modern equipment to interface with the millennia-old systems. Admiral Ortega coordinated evacuation efforts for the systems most immediately threatened. Throughout it all, Reese never left Nix's side, even as her abilities continued to develop at an accelerated pace. With each passing day, her sensitivity to the quantum entities increased, sometimes leaving her incapacitated with sensory overload as she perceived their vast consciousness across the void of space. During one such episode, as he held her trembling form in their quarters, she whispered, "They're afraid, Reese. Beneath the hunger, there's fear." "What could entities capable of consuming entire outposts possibly fear?" he asked, gently stroking her luminescent skin as the episode subsided. "Extinction," she replied softly. "Like us, they're fighting to survive. The quantum energy they absorb is their only sustenance in a universe increasingly hostile to their form of existence." Reese considered this, the diplomat in him immediately seeking common ground. If they're intelligent, if they're just trying to survive, maybe there's room for negotiation after all. Nix's luminescence flickered with cautious hope. "Perhaps, but first we need to establish boundaries they can't cross, show strength before offering peace. The galaxy's fate resting on a marriage that both our peoples once ridiculed," Reese mused, a hint of irony in his voice. "I wonder what Elder Vorn would say now." "He'd find some way to take credit if we succeed," Nix replied with a flicker of amusement, her strength returning as the episode passed, "and place all blame on our genetic incompatibility if we fail." As they prepared for departure to the primary anchor world, a small, uninhabited planet at the edge of the Perseus void, Reese found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a desperate diplomatic gambit had transformed into the most profound relationship of his life, and now possibly the salvation of 2 civilizations. Lieutenant Wang approached them on the shuttle bay, her expression solemn. "The Valorian Royal Guard has arrived to escort you. Elder Cora insists on accompanying your mission personally." A gesture of respect or a means of control? Reese wondered aloud. Perhaps both, Nyx replied, her luminescence steady as she prepared to face her people with newfound purpose. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that, for the first time, humans and Valorians are working together toward a common goal. As they boarded the shuttle that would take them to the Valorian flagship, Reese took Nyx's hand, feeling that familiar energy pulse between them. When all this is over, he said quietly, I'm taking you to Earth. There's this place called New Zealand I've always wanted to show you. Her luminescence brightened with a promise. When this is over, we'll explore both our worlds together. No more boundaries, no more prejudice. The shuttle doors closed behind them as they embarked on the most dangerous mission of their lives. United by a love that had once scandalized two worlds, but might now save them both.